Here's what authority looks like, Al. Here's what authority looks like. Floor warden. Means I'm in charge of everything that goes on this entire floor. Oh, it's gonna be a good day.
Okay, let's do this, Jay. Oh, get it out of your pocket. Oh God, but dealing with a child.
Some people are advanced talk show hosts, others are amateur. You've got something to look up to here.
Okay, anyway.
Convenience is key, as usual.
Welcome back, guys, to this week's Sharp Stories. Jay's just finding himself in life, of course, but also on this week's topic. We have this weekend the Vancouver mayoral vote. Advanced voting is on, but you can actually go and vote in person on October 15th, so this Saturday.
And it's gonna be real interesting.
Okay, so I'm gonna start this off on a positive note because I'm Mr. Positive and you're Mr. Pessimism.
Realistic.
It sounds just like my dad. I'm not a pessimist, I'm realistic.
Smart man.
Anyway, it's nice to see, so on a federal level, you typically get very broad terms and broad promises because naturally they're looking after things federally. You're not gonna be the same in Lethbridge, Alberta as you are in Toronto, Ontario. So they have to try and reach broad topics to appeal to everyone. When you have something that's more local, it's nice to see the candidates are actually pretty dialed into the issues in which we're facing. So there's a lot of talk on the lack of supply, building, permit processing, things like that. The difference just comes on how each individual candidate and team wants to handle it. But I'm glad to actually see that, you know, the fingers are on the button and they're kind of at least going in the right direction of what are some of the issues. And they're connected with some of the issues that we're seeing as local Vancouverites on the ground.
So there's only so many topics that obviously these guys can discuss. We're discussing housing today. There's also highlighted topics of accountability, environment and climate change, of course, mental health and addiction, and public
just talking
safety
about housing though. There's too much to go through. We're just talking about housing.
So today, as I was getting at before interrupted, we are just talking about the housing platforms.
See how I just said? You took a minute to say what you're going to say. See how I just took 2 seconds?
There are 5 candidates that we're going to be diving into today.
Okay.
And
let's go through one by one.
The details of each. So, okay, so the current, we'll just jump into it then. The current Mayor is Kennedy Stewart, as we know. I'm going to try not to give personal opinions on any of these. I'm just going to give umbrella opinions that may be had by some based on some of these situations, just to keep it neutral.
Okay, so what's the key points of his platform?
Okay. Forward Together plans to build 220,000 new homes over the next 10 years, including market and below market rentals, social housing, and co-ops, condos, and ground-oriented homes for the middle class, defined as households earning between 80 and 120,000. So he's upgrading the current target of 72,000 homes in 10 years to 220,000 homes. I don't know why he just doesn't say a million. Well, it's just completely ridiculous and irrelevant, these blasphemously large numbers that they throw out there to try and gain attention. But anyway, that would be a personal opinion, which I'm going to refrain from. So that was the one personal opinion you get.
And ironically, that's actually the bit that I'm happiest most about his platform and what he says. And the only reason being is because most of his platform is very broad.
I want to know how many he's built so far in the last 5 years, which I haven't been able to find.
So regardless,
it's just ridiculous.
No, because the platform that he said is very broad, and the problem is when something's very broad, there's no metrics, so you can't put how many dollars are going to that. What's the outcome of this going to look like? What are going to be the success points? When it's so broad, it's impossible to achieve. Think of the NDP when they say fix homelessness. Okay, well, what does that mean? What are your targets? What are the goals? The problem is with the broad targets is they're so broad, it's impossible to achieve them, but it's also impossible to fail, because provided you did something, anything, you've technically worked towards it. The 220,000, do I think he's going to build that many homes? Absolutely not. You'll see when we go through some of the other candidates that a big thing is trying to attract the builders in, because that's part of the problem. But that's one of the only metrics in which he's actually talking about on the housing side of things, where he's given a specific like pass or fail mark of 226,000. The vacancy control is disgusting.
No, wait. We've got other points here.
Okay.
That is next, but we go case by case because these are very interesting points. And yes, obviously,
okay, carry on.
The most important is what you're about to say. Stewart and his team also want to extend rental protections, adding permanent vacancy control to new rentals and keep the empty homes tax. Now, I'll let you highlight what exactly vacancy control is, because we haven't had it here for a very long time. Since the 80s, I believe it was kicked out last. I think it hasn't been here for a very good reason, and why the market has done what it's done. But I think it's going to handcuff the market very quickly as well. What is vacancy control, Benjamin Mark Robinson? Okay,
so vacancy control, so you're probably used to rent control, which is, like they've been talking about, it can only go up 2%, so on and so forth. Vacancy control is on new tenancy. So your rental control is, okay, your rent can only go up 2% this year to your existing tenancies. Vacancy control is stop. Let me finish. Good. Once, just once. Vacancy control is if the tenant moves out, the landlord is restricted from upping the rent to a certain level too high. And the whole idea behind it is to incentivize landlords to not want to get their tenants out. The problem that you do that is there's such thing as property rights. The moment you start telling landlords that as well as rent control, you also are limited to what you can increase the rent should your tenant move out. So if everything else is going for $3,000 a month, your tenant has been in there for a couple of years paying $2,000 and you're told that you can only put it up to $2,200, gone goes investment. Gone goes investment in real estate. And why that's a problem, because a lot of renters are probably watching this thinking, this is fantastic, this is great news. Vancouver has less than 1% usually vacancy rates for rentals. That will be a catastrophe to the rental market, because you won't be dealing with high rents, you'll just be dealing with there are no rents. There are no rental properties available because investors will be like, thank you, we're out.
So what I was going to say before that is, to the rent control point, what we've seen pre-COVID, 2% plus inflation was the allowable rent increase annually for the same tenant that kept rolling on past their first 12-month term into a month-to-month. That quickly changed to just inflation. And then when inflation went crazy, of course, they reversed that to just the 2%, which we had a video on a couple weeks ago. So you can see how the government clutches tighten around the market. And what we went into last time is that short-term thinking, 2%, great. It's not 2% plus or higher. Long-term thinking is that it's going to keep investors out of the market because it's tightening what they're told they're allowed to make on their investment, which is ridiculous. This vacancy control takes that 10 steps further. The one breath of fresh air that they had as landlords was, if you've had someone in there for 5 years and they're only allowed X% increase a year, they're clearly below market. Now you've got the flexibility to catch up with your new tenant. You're bound again by those annual increases, but your new tenant is at least starting at a market value. So these things, what people forget to understand long term is these things have to make sense for the guy that owns the property. And if it doesn't, then that gets sold off and that gets sold to a principal residence owner, and then that shrinks the inventory of the rental market. So again, this is going to, I agree with you, totally kill the rental market, because there's zero flexibility for them to grasp a fair market value. And why would they bother investing?
The only way that I can see this working is, and then this will be a complete backhand to the face of renters is if they come back and they say, vacancy control is in place, you cannot charge more than market value. Because what that is basically saying is, hey renters, we've put in vacancy control, but it's also saying to landlords, well, when people do leave, you can put your property up to market value, which is the issue in which we're seeing now that people are complaining about. Market rates have gone up 25%. So if they do put in a caveat like that, basically nothing's changed, and it's just a buzzword to say, hey guys, we put in vacancy control, which actually changes nothing. So it's like a backhand to the face to renters, which is it's an outright lie.
If he gets back in and he's the only one that has mentioned this vacancy control, it will be very telling if he's just kind of, again, using it, look, I'm doing something, and then the devil will be in the details. What does that cap actually look like?
I think
we don't know.
To summarize Kennedy Stewart as well is, look, he's been in since 2018. So if you're happy with the way that the market is now and the way that things are unfolding and what he's done since 2018, then okay, vote for him because you're happy. If you want things to change and be different, I mean, he's not going to be the guy.
Yeah. Let's move on from that because we could talk about this all day. Continuing on Kennedy's platform, the party's platform promises to address the permit and public hearing process and create specialized teams to approve big impact projects. Very broad, general. Stewart has also promised to pre-zone areas of the city to speed up housing construction and move forward with the Vancouver Plan land use strategy that council approved in July.
Again, they've already brought on teams to help with the backlog of permit applications, and it's not helping. So dedicating a special team, you've already done it and it's not helping. And then move the plan forward. Okay, when, where, how, what timeline are we going by here? All too broad.
Yeah, okay, so that's him. The next is Ken Sim, who's kind of the biggest contender, I think. I think he only lost by 700 votes last time.
Pretty cool.
So this is him back. Sim and ABC Vancouver plan to reduce development permit wait times and increase housing supply. So this is, from what I've seen, the biggest kind of anchor that he's basing his housing platform on. The party wants to launch a 3331 permit approval system, which will approve, this is very appealing, renovation applications within 3 days.
3 days, wow.
3 days. Townhouse and single family homes within 3 weeks. Multifamily and mid-rise buildings within 3 months. And under this system, high-rise and large-scale project applications will be assessed within 1 year. Wow. So that is like at the highest end 10% of the current wait times, and taking that rate down. I mean, a 3-day renovation application is, compared to what you're dealing with now, is
what, a 3-week single family home,
it's
or
crazy.
3 month single family home. Now, so that's what I was talking about when I was talking about too broad. This here is an actual, okay, this is what we're going to bring it down to.
Lines
what
in
our
the sand.
Targets are. Yeah. There's lines in the sand of pass and fail. If this gets in, do I think for a minute it's going to be 3331? No. But if it ended up becoming 6662, it's still a vast improvement. And again, getting closer to that is going to be a huge difference, because our issue really in the city is permitting process. There's a lot of talk about trying to incentivize other developers and bringing them in. If you fix the permitting process, that's a large step towards the right direction, because part of the problem now is the holding costs. Like, you're waiting a year plus right now on, it's money coming out every month without anything moving forward, and developers have to build that into the budget. Which
gets pushed on to end users, of course, making things more expensive. Okay, ABC Majority Council is also committed to this is a big one that I haven't heard talked about that much until now. Predictable community amenity contributions using development. Okay, so that's one. Using development fees for affordable housing. Reviewing the city's housing strategy for the middle class, pre-approving laneway home templates, and supporting the empty homes tax. So the community amenity plans, CACs, are something that when a developer goes to the table with the city and says, this is what I want to build, the city looks at this as an opportunity to get some financial input to the immediate area? Do we need roads made, sidewalks made? Do we need to replumb Burrard Street? What do we need? Are there community groups that we think need a little financial sprinkle? It's ridiculous. And the city is using these because obviously they can't. That's personal opinion. Sorry, you go.
So they're summarized as like in kind or cash donations from the property developers. And so that's why a lot of the times you'll see maybe a new building, a high rise go up in Vancouver, and next to it's or close to it's a pretty new social housing element or something like that. I mean, I understand.
That's different again, but yeah.
But I understand the appeal in it. Just as an FYI, it's you as the purchaser who pays that cost, because a developer in kind or cash, if they decide, okay, we want to make X amount of millions of dollars from this, and then the city are like, well, okay, then we want you to invest $10 million in this as part of your contribution. All that happens is the prices in which they sell for of all of the apartments go up a little bit in order to make up that 10 million.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, it's you guys as buyers and we as buyers who pay for it. But it's one of those things I do kind of, it's that balance of, okay, what is economically most effective versus the morality of it as well.
The developers are giving the city homes, and in addition, the city wants upgrades for that privilege as well. Incentives, yes, back to them. To your point about social, yes, that's a little bit different, as that is basically you want this much density. Okay, we need you to deliver this much affordable housing density in order to get this much residential market sellable density that you're selling at X amount of foot. So again, that's kind of in and around, but that is, I'm not going to layer on any more opinion of that. So that's that. The pre-approved laneway home templates.
Okay, I like that.
Interesting. I think that's good.
I like that. I imagine that will work as similar to a modern day Vancouver special that, you know, provided you follow a certain template and design and all things are in accordance, that's just going to be like pre-approved, you ready, you can go get it built.
And I think that really is in parallel with his main anchor, which is dramatically minimizing the red tape and the timeline of all of this development.
Well, the pre-approved like secondary suites and laneway homes is only just going to free up capacity for the people at the city to work through them and get them done. And I mean, that's not to take away from anyone at the city. I mean, they are dealing with an abundance of applications, so this just frees up space for them to do so. Bandwidth was the word I was looking for.
There you go. And supporting the empty homes tax.
I mean, I support the empty homes tax as well. I'm for that.
I don't, but fair enough. My opinion doesn't matter here. Okay.
It doesn't.
Colleen Hardwick.
No, I'm not going to put my personal opinion on it.
Team's platform promises to build various housing models, co-ops, multiplexes, and apartments with an emphasis on working with neighborhood residents to get their input on development. Now, I've seen caveats on that, that she wants these co-ops specifically on city land. Mm-hmm. Ability also to do a referendum for a $500 million loan. Taking $500 million off the top is not something I would suggest, especially in this economic climate, but that's fine. To build 2,000 new homes on city land and provide co-ops for low-end and high-income social housing.
So this is something which is quite questionable to me. Co-ops have been mentioned by more than one candidate. Co-ops typically, for those who don't know, the way it works is usually a numbered company or such owns the building, and when you purchase X amount of shares within that corporation, and then you have exclusive use and rights to the property that you're looking at and so on. But there's one group, if I remember correctly, that actually allows for financing of this. So all of you out there getting your pre-approvals at TD, Scotiabank, RBC, Van City, they don't do co-ops. They won't finance a co-op. On top of that, it's usually a 30% plus down payment. I mean, especially for first-time home buyers and for low income and even middle income, 30, sometimes 35+% is a crazy amount to get into, especially when you have very little like financing opportunity out there. And also you need to go through interviews as well sometimes to make sure that you can get in. It just seems a very backward idea. And I don't like the idea about the loan, because I think something that we can all agree upon is, I believe it was the NDP who purchased those like hotels and homes for like 50 million, 70 million in like Yaletown and things like that in order to house the homeless. It was a complete waste of money. Like, you got so little bang for your buck, because there's not the services around to support the people who need it like you do have in Gastown. That's why a lot of the social housing is down there, because there is a lot of support for that. You don't have that, it's just caused crime to go up. I mean, we've got a real big problem with crime at the moment in Vancouver. So you just spent an abundance of money on something which didn't help at all. If anything, it just worsened the problem, because you took people away from the resources in which they need. So to me, you're doing a referendum on doing the same thing. And also the platform that she's talking about these social housing and stuff like that, like for co-ops and things, I don't see where it's gonna fix the problem.
I'm gonna leave it at that.
Okay.
Hardwick and team also plan to use city-owned land for affordable housing. So we've kind of touched on that. Stop spot rezoning without neighborhood input.
Crazy,
and
man.
change permitting and climate regulations to make it easier for homeowners to add secondary suites and laneway housing.
Okay, the add the secondary suites and laneway housing, yes, good. That's kind of a common thing that we're talking about here that allows more density. The stop spot rezoning to me is just crazy. So spot rezoning is when somebody like literally applies to rezone a particular parcel of land in order to build something that doesn't typically conform with what the area is zoned for. That to me is just, why would you add another barrier to entry? Like, we need those people. Like, our problems are not going to be fixed by people like Concord coming in and building 400 units here and various other large-scale developers. We need other developers, the more mom and pop shops, if you will, who are going to go in, they're going to pull together, they're going to purchase some land, and they're going to make it into something more. That's how we're going to increase the density. So putting that in without residential support, I know what she's saying, but I think she's going against the plan of, look, we really need multifamily homes. So her policy goes, like, it says the right things, but then what she wants to do actually counteracts. Because naturally, if you live in we've had this discussion before, if you live in a single family zoned area, it's a nice area, your interest is preserving your own area, not moving Vancouver forward for the masses. So it's going to be an uphill battle on each and every occasion, and it's going to get her nowhere. Actually, I read that and I actually kind of think you have no idea when it comes to the housing side.
I think that them trying to get layers of kind of,
it's asking permission. It's
so,
hey, we want to build this. Is this okay? Like,
but are they actually not going to do it and pass it if they say no?
Well, this is the thing. So
then it's obviously just lip service. And if they do that to say no, I agree with you. She has no idea, because I also agree with you that no one living in these homes that are getting in areas that are getting gentrified with multifamily are like, this is really helping out.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have a 6-story tower, 10-story tower on the other side of my lane.
Of course, nobody wants that.
That's her. Mark Marissen, Progress Vancouver, again, plans to build 136,000 market and social housing units over 10 years and has 12-point plan. That includes zoning changes to accommodate more multi-unit housing, a new civic corporation to, again, more bureaucracy layers that we have to pay for on the way through, to manage mixed income housing, and a luxury homes surtax. So a corporation to manage mixed income housing. Ambiguous 136,000 units, and a 12-point plan.
Again, if you've actually got a plan in place, then I'm more for it as opposed to the broad terms. I think the target for housing is much more achievable than what Kennedy Stewart is saying. Again, whether it actually comes about, that seems to be a common theme with every politician on every level, promising a certain amount of housing and it not being delivered. So, but again,
Why jump on the bandwagon?
I don't agree with making a particular civic outfit in order to help with. You're just spending more tax dollars, which could be redirected elsewhere. And it's the same sort of thing that we were talking about, is designating specific teams. Like, it's not working.
A luxury homes surtax. The Robin Hood approach? Disagree?
There's always a cheeky little tax the rich. Tax the rich more.
Despicable. They've worked hard. Marissen says he will permit seniors housing construction in all neighborhoods and more family-oriented multi-unit housing around schools, playgrounds, and transit. Okay.
That's pretty much happening now. If you look further, I mean, we're pretty built up here in Vancouver, but if you look further out at like your Burnabys and things like that, they're building neighborhoods around like Brentwood and out, Burquitlam and out.
But if you've now got more subway stops throughout, let's say, the west side, which they're doing now, are they going to allow a higher density around those stops? I'm assuming that's what this means, which, again, I disagree with, but that's fine.
We'll agree to disagree on that one. Yeah.
Okay, and then the party intends to use vacant land for outdoor shelters while building homeless housing. So directing, when they say outdoor shelters, I'm guessing that means like we're going to move Tent City specifically here, or no? I don't know. While building homeless housing. I'm
fine with that. Like, again, I'm fine with that because right now, our downtown core there, and it's kind of like I'm trying to think of the word here, but it's like a cat and mouse thing. Moves to Oppenheim Park, they move away, and then it goes to Strathcona Park, and then it goes to Crab Park, but it just goes along this big circle, which actually isn't helping things. So to actually come out and say, okay, this is what we're going to do, there's going to be temporary accommodation here in open space while we build these homes to get them in these homes. Again, that's a plan of action. Like I'm assuming everything here is equal and they're actually planning to move forward and actually do something about it. It's, to be honest, it's the most answer I've heard from any of them so far.
Neighborhood, yes, and then more family-oriented multi-unit housing around schools, playground, transit. Okay. Yeah. Party intends to use vacant land for outdoor shelters, yes, while building homeless housing. Now, Progress also plans to negotiate a new Vancouver agreement with Victoria and Ottawa, which it says will help with reliable funding of social housing. So they're going to go beg for more money. Okay.
Again, how much more money?
Also, an interesting point that wasn't in this, but in another site that we were looking at, he wants to lift the apartment ban, so allowing rentals and 6-story development in every part of the city. So just a blanket, if we're putting in rentals or up to 6 stories, the zoning allows it. I assume that means. And then ending CAC contributions for a flat rate. Speed up permanent 6 to 10 years to build high-rise developments in 1 year. That's Kim Sims. Yeah. So his biggest thing, I think, is again removing this apartment ban, which allows that type of development to go in wherever, and then ending the CACs. So the problem is,
well, it's the CACs. It's just like a fixed CAC, right?
He wants a fixed rate, ending the negotiation of CACs. Okay. So a fixed percentage, I assume. Instead of, so what are you going to give us, blah, 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 that goes back and forth.
Again, I can get behind that. Better. If they're going to pay it anyway, it streamlines everything.
Yeah. So again, if you were to remove something totally like the CACs, where's that money going to come from? They're just going to charge it from somewhere else. They're used to having it, used to spending it. It's going to come from somewhere else. They're not just going to say, okay, now we don't have that. So fair enough. Okay, Fred Harding. The NPA's housing plan includes reducing permit wait times, yes, setting supply targets, Yes. Implementing flat rate community amenity contributions. Yes. And building communities around transit hubs. Supply targets will be based on immigration numbers. Remember, I got called a racist a couple months back for speaking about immigration numbers. So those things we've all heard, except for supply, so housing supply targets based around immigration numbers, which again is very ambiguous because do we actually know, outside of looking at averages, how many immigrants come to Greater Vancouver every year, really? And to base something as important as how much we're going to build on that subjective number,
I imagine they'll just work off of a little bit of a delayed system based on like, okay, so we had this immigration a year or two, or probably 2 years ago. But again, they're going to have to speed up the processing permit here, because if you're basing immigration on what happened in 2023, for example, and you're looking to build in 2024, well, if your permit process takes 2 years, you're building something in 2025, 2026 based on immigration that was 2023. So, I mean, I like it because, yes, we do have to keep up with immigration. That's one of the things that we've spoken about before. We're already behind, so we want to keep that going. Again, how is that going to be worked out? What are those numbers going to look like?
Yeah. Subjective. Okay. Fred Harding and team intend to pre-zone supply targets to end what is called building-to-building battles at City Hall and cap permit wait times. I like Ken Sim's approach as he's putting an exact cap, and the word cap is as subjective as anything, but hopefully if he was to get in, that is tightening the hell out of what we currently have.
Yeah, and what does it look like if they go over that? You know, okay, it's capped, but what does that look like if it doesn't go over? So are we actually are you gonna be told, okay, well, you've got the approval, or this is gonna happen if we go over, or is it just, we're gonna cap it, but if we go over, it doesn't really matter? So,
parties planning to incentivize the private sector to increase supply and partner with senior levels of government to ensure, quote, the greatest investment possible in the city. So incentivize the private sector. There are mountains of layers of taxation that goes on. Hopefully it would be from a taxation side. Hopefully it would be from, again, to your mom and pop point, they get favorable timelines.
Yep.
Something cool along those lines would be very helpful, because right now, with the way everything's going, the mom and pops are obviously the first ones out the door to say, I'm waiting, I'm not building, this is too risky, we're putting too much into this, and there's too much subjective nature in the city and the economy at large. So to incentivize them back in on some of those levels, yes, would be a good thing to see. I like the sound of that. Senior levels of government, I'm assuming that just means they get hopefully fast-tracked and less red tape and less tax. Last point, NPA will also work with financial providers to set targets for the first-time home buyers program.
So this, a new first-time home buyers program dedicated to Vancouver and what it's like in Vancouver.
Hopefully that's, I would assume as the mayor, that's what that would mean. That's
what I'm hoping. If you're just trying to get people to move on to the government incentive, which is like federally focused, then no, it's a moot point. But I would like to see something like that for first-time home buyers.
Something that reflects our pricing here specifically.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so that's the breakdown. I've got a few other points here that I've gathered from other sites we've looked at with regards to this. Rezoning single-family homes for apartments in general. Sims specifically wants to fix the permitting process first before getting into the zoning conversation.
Yeah, I think if you're living in the single-family area and you don't want that to happen and you want to preserve your neighborhood, then you should be all for fixing the permitting process, because in fixing that permitting process, it will allow a lot more inventory to come in areas that people want to develop in now, as opposed to changing those single family only areas. So it's basically going to delay. I don't think it's going to stop it personally, but it's going to delay that tactic for you.
Yeah. Hardwick agree to provide social housing. Yeah, and she just thinks the zoning circumstance now is inflating land values and that's needed. Co-op housing on city lands, they all agree that this is needed. An interesting point, someone brought up the cost of construction, inflation to cause Kennedy Stewart's point on that was inflation will continue to cause a slowdown in the construction industry, leading to more freed up labor. Because everyone's not going to be as busy. Someone brought up the fact, okay, but construction workers can't afford to live in the city, to which point he said workers can live in workforce housing on vacant city land for cheaper and to help attract more of them to the city. That's interesting. So if you're a construction worker, you can live in a container house or something on city land for cheaper while you're here helping build the city. I think that's kind of cool. SROs, single room occupancy, they all agree that a lot of them need updating and some need to go. Sims agrees or thinks that the use of city land with tiny homes, I don't know if that's container homes or not, would help. As we all know, the single room occupancy have been a lot of the fires downtown east side, Chinatown, and that's taken a few buildings out completely. So those are single room, basically units that people can stay in for low income or just totally social, subsidized. And there's been a lot of issues with those lately. And yeah, so that's the rundown.
Yeah, I mean, to our point, like we started off with, I think there's a lot of, everyone seems kind of tuned in as to what the issues are. What really differentiates them is how they're looking to deal with it. And I think I tend to lean more towards people who actually set targets, who have no problem setting targets up front rather than broad coverage.
Yep.
Personally.
Well, it puts their name on the line to a measurable stick, not just an ambiguous.
Personally, I don't want Stewart. I don't think he's really done a particularly good job since he's been here. It's more of the same. And then and I'm just talking from a housing standpoint here. And then Colleen Hardwick is a no for me. As to everyone else, I mean, there's some good ideas. We'll see what happens on October 15th.
Yeah, I see a lot of talk, obviously, from the development community and the real estate community leaning towards ABC Vancouver, which is Ken Sim, because I think the majority of people understand that there's so much red tape and so much time and money lost just in the front end of the process, which is all bound by these government bodies, that if that can be loosened, that will streamline everyone's life in general.
Well, and as renters and potential homeowners, it's going to serve you best if these things and these permitting changes and the more production go ahead, because it's just allowing you a lot more supply, and we're already undersupplied, which is one of the reasons why we're going through what we are. So it's going to allow you more supply, it's going to allow you more options for housing. It's going to increase incentive for basically Vancouver to continue growing from a residential unit standpoint, which is only going to make your life a lot better.
Yeah, I think renters, I know they're quick to, we see a lot of stuff in the news or wherever you're looking, the big bad landlord, everyone hates developers, they're greedy, blah, 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 and all these, I think, very short-term incentivized points of view. But if you look long-term, and if you're saving for a place and you think you're going to be saving for the next 5+ years, a long-term approach will help you, and that always comes back to more inventory. And you need landlords, and more of them, and you need developers, and more of it to build that inventory platform to keep your monthly costs down. Things like vacancy control is just going to kill you.
That's it.
I think that's it. That's more than enough time from us today.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us as always, guys.
Comment below. I'm not going to give my forecast or 2 cents on this for once, but comment below on who you think is the best for the entire city at large. Yeah.
Who you think is going to win. But yes, please like, subscribe, comment, press that little bell that notifies when we come up. And as always, we're open to questions. Thanks, guys.
See you next week.